We would love to see that happen. And because I'm a planner, I started moving polygons around on a map. It's an entirely grassroots effort. There's no real development interest here other than us being neighborhood folks who really want to see some underserved activities promoted on parkland or public land in the city. And beyond ice rinks, we thought, well, nobody's just going to get behind an ice rink proposal. People love pools. And if you go up to BC, almost every community center up there has an ice rink and a pool because the equipment is shared. It's very efficient to run the two together. And then they also add in other things such as gymnasium space and whatnot. So that became part of our idea. Then we got together with some folks at the YMCA and they've said, hey, we're outgrowing our university district location. We've been eyeballing that same site. So as a planner, I started trying to figure out where that would fit in. And then some financial folks that I coach with said, well, how are you going to pay for all this? And that's why you see at the north end of that map, there's a complex of mixed-use commercial residential development. It would be fairly lucrative if it was zoned appropriately for somebody. You could take some of that lucre and apply it to the community benefits that we're promoting towards the center of the site. And others said, well, we need more green space and park, and so we pushed the boundary of Frula Park to the north. And after a year and a half of noodling with plans and talking over beers, we think we found a really cool mix of different uses in that map that you see that could be financed through public-private partnership, public subsidy. A lot of dominoes have to fall in the right place. But it's something we're excited about. We're trying to promote entirely, not as RNA, but as a grassroots group, most of whom live in the surrounding mile or two, and who have real interest in seeing that sort of thing happen.
John, thank you. I know that there's a lot of work that's gone into that, and because those ideas are well formed, I think that they'll see the light of the survey. I think we'll capture interest and observations about those things, so we've got a thorough conversation as best we can. Sir.
Hi, my name's John Odegaard, and probably a good segue for me, excuse me, because I live right across the street from the reservoir. And one of the main reasons I came was in response. I haven't seen any updated plans when I saw the plans. So I appreciate that if it does become surplus, we need to find a smart use for that property. And I know with the light rail, I think the density's an issue. I think affordable housing's an issue. That there's a lot of things that could come into play and be part of the discussion there. I'm also not a NIMBY. I'm what's a yes in my front yard. I would like to see that put to the best use. I'm a frim fee or whatever that would be. But regardless of that, my reaction to the plan though, right now it's that reservoir. I think if you move across from a school, you expect buses and kids. If you buy a house on a freeway, you expect car noise. If you buy a house across the street from a fire station, you expect bells and sirens. But that property as it is now has been a passive, I used to say waterfront property. It's so the neighbors all around, it's residential on all sides and a park on the other. And just my response to the plan, I guess I would just ask for sensitivity to the people that live there and the character that is already there. Not that it shouldn't be developed. I think schools, as long as everything's done in a way that's sensitive and in character with the neighborhood. Because, again, I saw the first plans and it looked like instead of looking at the park property and nice green lawn, and this is totally self-serving on my part, but I would be looking at it, the space was allocated for I could tell, Subway restaurants or something, so that's quite the 180. From looking at a park and a passive and the geese land on there, and that was my big concern, is that it's completely changing the zoning and the character of what is my neighborhood that I've been stewarding and picking up litter and all those things for 20 years.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good point, and I'm sure it's shared by lots of other folks who live in the aisle. Please, ma'am.
I must live right next door to you. I live right across the reservoir too. I've lived there for 20 years myself, and what's always been so beautiful about it is it's so low, and I have amazing light in my house. And one thing I'm really concerned about is what happens if it's zoned for a 10-story building or something. It will completely change, for all of us who face on the reservoir, completely change how that feels. And I like the same person. I live on a busy street. I moved there, I knew that was a busy street. That was something that we acknowledged, it was part and parcel. but it's not like a change in having a huge development across there. I am biggest fan of public usage, schools, pools, even hockey rinks. But I think there needs to be some sensitivity to height restrictions and traffic and that type of thing, because, you know, some of us have lived for 20 years.
One last thing, and I'm sorry, but I do have a not very nice quality map like you have, but I had just a real rough idea as a legacy to the property. You know, that's a huge space. You know, develop the top part, keep the grass all the way around that gives that kind of legacy of what that property was. There's plenty of room to do on the top. So I'm way over my head as far as, you know, property development. But, you know, it's something to keep in mind that would, you know, mitigate that effect on the surrounding environment. You do what you know, on the top, you know, for the density, for the affordable housing, recreation, whatever.
Well, I'm encouraged that, I mean, people have very different ideas, I'm sure. I suppose some folks would say, don't do anything. I mean, just leave it as it is, and I like my view and my light. I sensed from listening to a couple of you who are, you know, front row stakeholders that you kind of get that something could happen, but you're sensitive to the impacts, and you're saying that would bear some more conversation. I think that's a pretty legitimate point of view. Sir, we haven't heard from you.
I too live right across the street from the reservoir, and part of it is just selfishness because it is such nice, quiet, open space. But as the city has changed a lot of the traffic patterns in the neighborhood, it is getting worse and worse. Traffic is backed up, trying to get to 5 or from 5. And any kind of development like this, there's no real parking in the area. Even if you put it in, it's through neighborhoods that have one-way streets. I would, and I realize from listening to what everyone has said about what the city has to do and so forth, who owns what, I'd like to see it turned into a solar farm. A solar farm. It's all below ground. You wouldn't have to look at it. It's all secure. The piping and conduits, all the wiring could go down through what's there. You wouldn't have to change how it looks at all.
But it's working hard in that way.
It's working hard for the city. Instead of bringing in traffic and pollution, it's giving us power.
That's one I would not have thought of. Please give it to us, and we'll circulate the idea. That's great. Other thoughts, sir?
With respect to not impacting the neighborhood, the character, there is a controversial one that has been going on. The Blanchette High School improving their sports field, adding lighting. There's been quite a lot of, you know, this between the neighbors because it's the light pollution. So if whatever is done here for this project, over time, be cautious about generating a facility that operates at night and provides lots of light pollution to the nearby neighborhoods.
So sensitivity.
Otherwise, you'll
to that.
run into a lot of pushback.
Yeah, I know there's strong feelings on all sides of that topic. So that's noted. And again, I want to stress, you don't have to stand up and say things. You're going to be heard if you write them up too. But if you have something to say.
Yeah, I guess since this is the people who live across from the reservoir.
How many of you live close to the reservoir? We've got some reservoir
Yeah.
neighbors here, but not everybody. Thank you.
We also live right across from the reservoir, and so we've been hearing a lot about, oh, the light in my house, my kid wants to play hockey. I think these are all great. I wanted to play hockey when I was a kid. But I'm most concerned that we won't be able to live across from the reservoir anymore if rents continue to go up in the neighborhood, if the price of housing continues to go up. We won't even have a house to live in at all. And so I think that the most important thing that needs to be centered, especially in a neighborhood that is already, you know, full with so many resources for people here, you know, great businesses, great parks are already nearby, like Ravenna Park and Maple Leaf Park, is making sure that everyone in the neighborhood can continue to enjoy those, and that folks, you know, regardless of their income, can enjoy Roosevelt. And I would hope to see a plan where affordable housing is the centerpiece, as opposed to something that's maybe tacked on at the end or just an afterthought.
So again, a site that large, one of the questions we'll pose to you is how you feel about the potential for multiple uses. I think it's a possibility. And I want to kind of weigh, the sentiment around that, because it is a large site. I've heard estimates, and Alex, you would have the definitive somewhere in your records. I hear that Fruhl is about 3 acres.
2.5.
2.5, and that the rest of the site, 13, 14, together 17. John, you've done some investigations there.
18.38, including the planting strips on the side of the road.
Okay, 18 acres. And the school district, when I asked them, say, how much space do you need for a school? And that number's not crisp, but it's 7, 8, 10, 11 acres. I was in an airplane this afternoon, I looked at Eckstein, and it's a pretty big spot, but some are bigger. Roosevelt High School is a pretty contained campus. I think that they would probably have some interest too in things. I mean, they're a stakeholder of some sort. Tom Van Bronckhorst.
A question for you, Jim. Under the HALA planning process, the city is considering changing the boundary for the urban village.
Right.
Is there any advantage to either to future development or expanding, to change the zoning to include the reservoir?
Because right now, it's not in the
It's
urban
not-
village,
it's
is
outside
that
the urban
correct?
village.
Yeah, and I'm not the authority, but Tom's making reference to the current conversation in city government, HALA, Housing Affordability and Mobility agenda, and it's very much focused on affordable housing. Jay, do you have, I know that you have been studying that, can you respond to Tom's question, or?
Just in, I guess, vague speculation that the underlying zoning is single family
At the reservoir,
at the reservoir
strange as it
right
sounds.
now, so,
Right.
so I guess it's probably rare, I can't speak for the city, but it's probably rare for the city to upzone that kind of more than a couple of steps. I mean, would they upzone it to low-rise 1 or to low-rise 2, to think the city would upzone it to multi, to MF or something different, or to, neighborhood commercial is probably.
I think it's hard to say. I mean, Alex said it's a political process. I think that's a fairly accurate statement.
Yeah, but the city hasn't proposed to expand the urban village onto the reservoir. They have proposed to expand the urban village.
In the current draft of the 2035 comp
East to
plan.
the south of
Right.
Roosevelt.
I think that's your issue, Tom, is where should that line go, if anywhere? Because there's some pushback, I'll tell you, because most of you are northerners. There's folks east of 15th and south of 65th that are kind of pushing back on the city's proposal to expand the line of the urban village into little house areas. And some people say, well, that's kind of obvious, you need to do that. Other people say, I don't think so. So that conversation is ongoing. Sir in the red jacket.
Thank you. Just a very open question. Did it ever come up during the District 4 elections where Rob Johnson was at? It's very broad, vague at this point, but did
I'm
it
not
make sense?
aware. I'm not aware. I know Rob, but we haven't talked about that. I could guess, but I don't think that would be fair.
Right.
But I would actually, and I've made myself a note the other day to feel him out on things like this. And he'll be concerned. He's our representative, or will be soon, and he needs to know what we think. He's attended a number of these meetings to that point, so he's aware of what's going on. Gina?
I talked to Rob Johnson personally about his thoughts on the reservoir, and while he does not offer a personal opinion about what he thinks should happen to it, he does, he expressed to me anyways, that he strongly believes that the neighborhood should have a process, and that the neighborhood association should have or develop some type of way to get funding, I guess, to try to further their goals with the site, sort of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he really supported our process for getting feedback within the neighborhood, and I asked him, as a district council member, what would you tell us for how to get what we want out of the city or whatever it is? And he said, you need the resources to
That's
put
good.
this together.
Thank you, Gina. We're going to go for another 5 minutes or so. It's a Tuesday night, and you've spent your time here, for which I'm very grateful. Sir?
My name's Emilio Garza. I'm looking for Councilmember-elect Rob Johnson.
Yes, you have.
So Jerry Morris here.
Welcome,
if you
and
guys
thanks.
have some specific questions, we'll be hanging around afterwards, so you can come out and talk to us. And if we don't have a specific answer, we'll make sure to forward those along.
Thanks for coming out. That's great.
Happy to be
I have a question. Okay, so I live in the Triangle.
Right.
And good friend neighbor of mine went to your most recent meeting, and she was told that the triangle is now no longer part of the RNA. And now, so she was really concerned because the RNA really is an organization that will be supporting us in this process, but if the triangle is not part of the RNA, at one point I thought it wasn't, and then it was.
I think it is. I've not heard anything.
I think it is too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the triangle is you guys know where the triangle is, north of 75th, west of 15th, and southeast of Lake City Way. I think it's part of Roosevelt Neighborhood Association. What do you think?
That's my understanding. Yeah, totally.
Okay. I think it should be.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, we're your neighborhood association.
Okay.
We welcome you.
I mean, we associate.
Oh, yes, for a long time, as long as I've been involved. Sir, blue shirt.
Yeah, my name's Nathan. I own a home. My wife and I own a home on 68th and 18th, just down the street from John. You know, in all these discussions, I have to first say thank you for all the groundwork that's been laid, both in this meeting, folks from the city, and various departments, John for doing the work that he's done, the RNA for sure. You know, as someone who's looking to live in this neighborhood, my wife and I bought in this neighborhood 3 years ago. Our plan is, as our elder neighbors like to say, they're going to be pulled out of the house horizontal. That's how long they want to be here, and that's our plan too. And I'm actually a fourth generation Seattleite in this neighborhood. My great-grandfather bought a house on 65th and 25th about 100 years ago. And I feel very strongly as a homeowner and as someone who's going to be raising a family in this neighborhood that we need to bring more families that don't have access to the resources that we have here into our neighborhood to have access to those resources, and that this property, were it to come available as something that we could develop, not being a reservoir, I think that it absolutely has to center affordable and low-income housing to bring families in that otherwise don't have access to Frula Park, Maple Leaf Reservoir Park, Ravenna Eckstein Community Center, Cowan Park, Ravenna Park, the new 14th Avenue Park. We are a neighborhood that has incredible diversity of open space and parks as it is now. And if we're talking about the future of the next 100 years in this neighborhood, that we really need to look at the ways in which we as a neighborhood are coming together to support other families to be able to have access to those resources. So.
Well put, thank you for that. I see another, sir.
For those of you who don't know me, I represent you in the legislature north of 76th Street, the triangle.
Your name?
Jerry Paulette. So north of 75th is the 46th district, and I live just 5 blocks north of the reservoir. And I understand, you know, the beauty of, you know, walk past it many days when I walk up from the view. As I said in my question though, we have an incredible, dire capacity problem in Seattle Public Schools. And if you want to raise a family here, the next question is, where would you send your children to school? Because Bryant has no more room, and there isn't, the city has said we cannot put in another portable. Literally, we're going to have, we expect over 1,000 new students in the U district from the upzone. And with transit-oriented development, the city hasn't, I haven't seen any figures, but planners estimate that based with transit-oriented development here, we would be adding several hundred new school children without any thought by the city to date on where the heck they all go to school, because there's no room in any school. Roosevelt is overcrowded. It's overcapacity. So the size of the park that you just said is literally the size of 3 model elementary schools or 2.5 high schools and middle schools with combined parks or playground areas. And I would urge people to think about both partnering with the public school system to help meet that need so we have schools for our children. And if we put this call out to the PTA, last school capacity meeting at Roosevelt High School had standing room only with about 400 people demanding more space.
Wow.
So I think we need to think about that and think about also partnering for a community center for the Roosevelt community, along with Seattle Public Schools, as has been discussed with SPS with some other sites. I would just put that out and we'd
Okay.
like to talk to people about it.
I think that's noted, school capacity for sure. It's not lost on anybody in the room that the Roosevelt Reservoir site is a few blocks north of the future light rail station. I mean, some might say that it really is, kind of annexed TOD property. I mean, that what happens on that site should be done with some thought to the fact that it's really on the regional transit backbone. Others might disagree, but I can easily imagine that logic being put forward. Lots of different ideas. I do want to end here, but just in the interest of time, but I want to emphasize again that we've got any number of mechanisms to hear you. The one in front of you is those silly little index cards. Brad's made some notes on the side. I failed to mention, and I apologize, we videotaped the meeting. That should probably have been acknowledged at the beginning. But I would encourage you to watch yourself in the future and to go back and watch some of the other meetings. Ellen is reminding me that we have what in the back? Is that an RNA membership form? We'd like people to join and support the ongoing efforts of the RNA. It's this wonderful little packet. Ellen is the secretary, the board secretary of the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association. We got a great team to help us put things on. Dan Wells, I'm sure I'll start forgetting people. Gina, Brad's running cameras, Ellen's handing out cards, Ainsley has recruited people, Dan has recruited people. The Calvary Christian Assembly is our ever-loving host for innumerable meetings. We're so grateful to CCA. And to you, thanks really for coming out. This feels like a good meeting. I think this is a good community process, and it's really early. Alex, I really want to give you special thanks because you really informed us tonight. I know about parks. Yeah, we'll have you back. Thanks a lot. Good night. John's got stuff outside. You can learn some more about that. Ellen, something else?
I would say you spoke eloquently to my
Yeah,
point.
let's collect the
Thank you.
cards
What's
to
your
the back
address?
table. Ellen will take them.
1503 on 75th and 15th, the brick house on the corner.
Oh, okay. I'm 1214 Northeast 75th, so I'm the red tutor with the big trees and the star on the tree.
Got it.
Christmas.
Okay,
Yeah.
very cool, nice.
Yeah, thanks.
Nice.
A suggestion, constructive criticism. Your presentation was excellent. Your style.
Plans and all that, so.
Oh, no, I want to hear more about it.
No, that's great.
One of the things that's interesting about this site is it's already excavated down.
Yeah.
International wall.
Five-story buildings.
And sometimes
It's shorter than most houses.
people have
That street.
Visualize it kind of more. Got it. And I, one part of the visual, there was like retail, like it's a sidewalk, right across the house. So the green line,